Hi everybody, this is Maya Good and this is a review of A Head Full of Ghosts. This portion of the review is going to not have spoilers. I'm going to have a second discussion video after this. And so definitely if you haven't read the book, this video is for you. If you have read the book, then go ahead and watch the other video, which is full of spoilers and a full discussion of how I feel about the book. I'm doing this video now, even though I literally just finished the book maybe an hour and a half ago, because I'm getting prepared to do the Literary Roadhouse discussion for the book, and I want to make sure that my thoughts on the book are out here before they get tainted by everybody else's conversation, because often my feelings on a book do change after discussion. So I read this book on my Kindle, as I do most of my books now, since I am trying not to collect too much stuff, and I definitely have some thoughts about the book. A Head Full of Ghosts is written by Paul Tremblay, and it's marketed as a thriller, and I think that that is correct marketing, but there were some issues with how it was marketed and how that set up my expectations for the book. I've never really had an issue with spoilers. I read spoilers. I don't worry about spoilers. I love reading discussions before I read a book. Not usually a problem for me. I've never thought about how marketing affects your mindset going into a book until this particular book. This book won the 2015 Bram Stoker Award, and let me just read you a couple sentences of the description on Amazon. It says, a chilling thriller that brilliantly blends psychological suspense and supernatural horror, reminiscent of Stephen King's The Shining, Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, and William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. That set me up to expect faster pace, to expect to be scared or really uncomfortable throughout a lot of the book. Now, I freely admit I can be a little jaded about my horror. I've read a lot of it. Well, not a whole lot. There are definitely people that have read more horror than me. But as a child, I did read a significant amount of horror. It's one of the genres that I frequently do enjoy, and I have watched some pretty gruesome horror flicks that don't really bother me. So at first, as I was reading this book, and I really wasn't getting the sense of fear or discomfort or that itchy feeling when you're reading a horror book where you're like not sure what's going to happen and you're worried for the characters. I wasn't getting any of that. And initially I thought that was because maybe I'm just too jaded. I mean, I just watched a Serbian film and it didn't even hardly faze me. So that was my initial thought. But as I was reading it, I realized, no, that's not the case. There's some really interesting literary elements that are used in this book as far as using the concept of blogging, and the characters are in a reality show that are extremely interesting, but also do take away from the horror suspense. So just to give you an overview, this book is about a young girl named Mary who, as an adult, is being interviewed by a best-selling author for a nonfiction book about what happened to her family when she was 8 years old. And when she was 8, her older sister was having either a mental breakdown or she was being possessed, and a series of events happened as a result of that have completely changed her life and who she is as a person. And so I was expecting to go into this book with a really strong sense of fear and trepidation, and perhaps really exploring that line between what is supernatural and what is mental illness, which is something I'm very fascinated by. It's something that my own book is touching on, and so that's what I went into this book expecting. I wasn't really drawn into the book until almost 100 pages in the book. Now, that's a third of the way in the book. It's not a very long book. It's 285 pages long, so it isn't very long to begin with, and it took me almost a third of the book just to get into the book. I felt myself being distracted. I felt myself, my attention being pulled away by other things and having to remind myself to go back to reading the book, which is notable because the book is not difficult reading. It's very quick reading. The language is very easy. It's well written, but it isn't exceptionally well written to me. One of the things I like about horror is a lot of horror writers are pretty literary in their use of language and description, and this book was much more plain spoken and read much more like contemporary fiction than what I'm used to for horror. And for example, I typically enjoy really old Stephen King. I love John Lindqvist. Let Me In is like my favorite book of all time. It still is. I love Beloved. That definitely touches on that line in a really interesting, cultural, significant way. And so I didn't get that feeling from this book. What I did get from this book was an interesting exploration of how trauma reverberates through an entire family, and how us as a society feed on that. The part of the book that I found most interesting was how the reality TV show that her family is a part of further traumatizes the family. And I thought that that was probably my favorite part of the entire book. And so, just as a quick non-spoiler review, I did enjoy the book. I think I actually would have enjoyed it a lot better had I not known that Stephen King called it the scariest book he's ever written. I think that that really set me up as far as expectation-wise. That ended up letting me down. And that's the first time that's really happened to me for any book, where, you know, someone else's review made it so that I enjoyed the book less. You know, and for me, when I hear a best-selling, extremely well-known, well-respected horror author say a book scared them, and their early books were some of the books that really built my foundation of reading, I go into reading that book with a certain expectation. I expect it to have that constant feeling of fear and trepidation and worry, and my heart palpitating as I'm reading. And I really didn't get any of that. The book was a much slower pace than what I normally enjoy for a thriller, but it was an interesting pace. And there was so much just playing around with the form and function of novel. And I think when I look at it that way, when I look at it as a psychological thriller that's a little bit less on the thriller side, more on the literary fiction side, more on like the contemporary, I don't know what they would call it, maybe upmarket side, I do enjoy it more, because then that expectation of being made to be afraid or worried is kind of taken away. The ending in the book definitely sucked me in. I enjoyed the ending a lot. I think that a lot of people are probably going to have their most problems with the ending, but that was the part that really worked for me the most. And I'm looking forward to talking about that in the full-on discussion in the next video. But for this video, I just want to let you guys know that this is a good book, but don't expect it to be The Exorcist. Don't expect it to be The Shining. Don't expect to go to sleep and have nightmares. Don't expect any of that. Go into this book expecting to read a really interesting novel about a very contemporary experience of possibly possession, most likely mental illness, that really explores religion and faith and atheism and society and how we watch people in peril with enjoyment. So would I recommend this book? Yes. If I were to rate this book, 1 to 5 stars, unfortunately I give it a 3. It doesn't quite rate a 4 for me. 5s almost never happen. So, I think this would be like a really solid 3. It's good. It's interesting. I would recommend it, but it's not the best book I've ever read. So on to the next video.